Howdy, we're back for episode 61, reading approximately 10 minutes a day from the Anarchist Handbook, organized by Michael Malice, and it is July 27th, 2021, and we're continuing with Chapter 18, Morris and Linda Tannehill from The Market for Liberty, 1970. And we'll just go ahead and start reading about a fourth of the way down on page 237. In the process of collecting from the aggressor, the victim or his agents may not carelessly or viciously destroy values belonging to the aggressor or take more from him than the original property or an equivalent value plus costs occasioned by the aggression. If the victim does so, he puts himself in debt to the aggressor, unless, of course, the aggressor has made the destruction inevitable by refusing to give up the victim's property without a fight. If the accused aggressor claims he is innocent or that the amount of reparations claimed by the victim is excessive, a situation of dispute exists between them which may require arbitration. The conditions of such arbitration, the forces impelling both parties to accept it as binding, and the market guarantees of its justice will now be examined. In a laissez-faire society, insurance companies would sell policies covering the insured against loss of value by aggression, the cost of the policy based on the worth of the values covered and the amount of risk. Since aggressors would, in most instances, pay the major costs of their aggression, the insurance companies would lose only when the aggressor could not be identified and/or apprehended. When he died before making full reparations, or when the reparations were too great for him to be able to pay in his lifetime. Since the companies would recover most of their losses, and since aggression would be much less common in a free market society, costs of aggression insurance would be low, and almost all individuals could afford to be covered. For this reason, we shall deal primarily with the case of an insured individual who becomes the victim of aggression. Upon suffering the aggression, assuming that immediate self-defense was either impossible or inappropriate, the victim would, as soon as possible, call his insurance company. The company would immediately send an investigator to determine the validity of his claim and the extent of the loss. When the amount was ascertained, the company would fully compensate the victim within the limits of the terms of the insurance policy. It would also act where feasible to minimize his inconvenience. For example, lend him a car until his stolen one is recovered or replaced, in order to promote customer goodwill and increase sales. Anyone ever heard of a government police department doing this? When the terms of the policy had been fulfilled, the insurance company, exercising its right of subrogation, would attempt to identify and apprehend the aggressor in order to recover its losses. At this point, the victim would be relieved of any further responsibilities in the case, except possibly appearing as a witness at any arbitration hearings. If necessary, the insurance company would use detectives to apprehend the aggressor. Whether it used its own company detectives or hired an independent defense service would depend on which course was more feasible under the circumstances. Obviously, a competitive private enterprise defense agency, whether an auxiliary of a particular insurance company or an independent firm hired by several insurance companies, as are some claims adjusting companies today, would be far more efficient at the business of solving crimes and apprehending aggressors than are the present governmental police departments. In a free market, competition impels toward excellence. Upon apprehending the aggressor, the insurance company's representatives would present him with a bill covering all damages and costs. Their first approach would be as peaceful as the situation permitted, since force is a non-productive expenditure of energy and resources and is therefore avoided by the market whenever possible. First, the insurance company's representatives would attempt a voluntary settlement with the accused aggressor. If he was obviously guilty and the amount of reparations requested was just, it would be in his interest to agree to the settlement and avoid involving an arbitration agency, since the cost of any arbitration would be added onto his bill if he lost in his attempt to cheat justice. If the accused aggressor claimed innocence or wished to contest the amount of the bill, and he and the insurance company's representatives could come to no agreement, the matter would have to be submitted to binding arbitration. just as would a contractual dispute. Legislation forcing the parties to submit to binding arbitration would be unnecessary, since each party would find arbitration to be in his own self-interest. Nor would it be necessary to have legal protection for the rights of all involved, because the structure of the market situation would protect them. For example, the insurance company would not dare to bring charges against a man unless it had very good evidence of his guilt, nor would it dare to ignore any request he made for arbitration. If the insurance company blundered in this manner, the accused, especially if he were innocent, could bring charges against the company, forcing it to drop its original charges and/or billing it for damages. Nor could it refuse to submit to arbitration on his charges against it, for it would do serious damage to its business reputation if it did. And in a free market context, in which economic success is dependent on individual or corporate reputation, no company can afford to build a reputation of carelessness, unreliability, and unfairness. It is worthy of note here that the notion of always presuming a man innocent until he is proven guilty by a jury trial can be irrational and sometimes downright ridiculous. For instance, when a man commits a political assassination in plain sight of several million television viewers, many of whom can positively identify him from the films of the incident, and is arrested on the spot with the gun still in his hand, it is foolish to attempt to ignore the facts and pretend he is innocent until a jury can rule on the matter. Though the burden of proof always rests on the accuser, and the accused must always be given the benefit of the doubt, a man should be presumed neither innocent nor guilty until there is sufficient evidence to make a clear decision. And when the evidence is in, he should be presumed to be whatever the facts indicate he is. An arbiter's decision is necessary only when the evidence is unclear and/or there is a dispute which cannot be resolved without the help of an unbiased third party. The accused aggressor would desire arbitration if he wanted to prove his innocence or felt that he was being overcharged for his aggression, since without arbitration the charges against him would stand as made and he would have to pay the bill. By means of arbitration, he could prove his innocence and thus avoid paying reparations, or if guilty, he would have some say about the amount of reparations. If innocent, he would be especially eager for arbitration, not only to confirm his good reputation, but to collect damages from the insurance company for the trouble it had caused him, and thereby rectify the injustice against him. A further guarantee against the possibility of an innocent man being railroaded is that every individual connected with his case would be fully responsible for his own actions, and none could hide behind legal immunity or do governmental police and jailers. If you knew that a prisoner put into your custody to work off his debt could, if innocent, demand and get reparations from you for holding him against his will, you would be very reluctant to accept any prisoners without being fully satisfied as to their guilt. Thus, the unhampered market would, in this area as in any other, set up a situation in which irrationality and injustice were automatically discouraged and penalized without any resort to statutory law and government. The insurance company and the accused aggressor, as disputing parties, would mutually choose an arbitration agency or agencies in case they wish to provide for an appeal, and contractually bind themselves to abide by its decision. In the event they were unable to agree on a single arbitration agency, each could designate his own agency preference, and the two agencies would hear the case jointly, with the prior provision that if they disagreed on the decision, they would submit the case to a third agency previously selected by both for final arbitration. Such a course might be more expensive. The insurance company could order its defense agency to incarcerate the accused aggressor before and during arbitration, which would probably be only a matter of few days, since the market is always more efficient than the bumbling government. But in doing so, they would have to take two factors into consideration. First, if the accused were shown to be innocent, the insurance company and defense agency would owe him reparations for holding him against his will. Even if he were judged guilty, they would be responsible to make reparations if they had treated him with force in excess of what the situation warranted. Not being government agents, they would have no legal immunity from the consequence of their actions. Second, holding a man is expensive. It requires room, board, and guards. For these reasons, the defense company would put the accused aggressor under no more restraint than was deemed necessary to keep him from running off and hiding. It would be the job of the arbitration agency to ascertain the guilt or innocence of the accused and to determine the amount of reparations due. In settling the reparations payment, the arbiters would operate according to the principle that justice in a case of aggression consists of requiring the aggressor to compensate the victim for his loss insofar as is humanly possible. Since each case of aggression is unique, involving different people, actions, and circumstances, reparations payments would be based on the circumstances of each case rather than on statutory law and legal precedent. Although cases of aggression vary widely, there are several expense factors which, in varying combinations, determine the amount of loss and thus the size of reparations. And we'll go ahead and stop right there, about a third of the way down on page 241, and be back tomorrow for another about 10 minutes a day reading the Anarchist Handbook organized by Michael Malice. And remember, the black flag comes in a never-ending rainbow of colors, like a unicorn flying through the atmosphere with puffy clouds.